Well, hello everybody. This is the Bread Dude, or the artist formerly known as Bread Dude, along with Rebecca, my niece and fabulous partner in crime. This year with the quarantine, we've gotten several requests from people asking for the recipe for Stollen. And it got me thinking that maybe it'd be helpful if we shot a quick video, not just giving people the recipe for Stollen, but also showing you how to do Stollen. When I was a kid, we had Stollen every year. My mom used to make it, and she made it with a method that involved long periods of fermentation. She would actually set up a space heater in the bathroom of my house to make it warm enough for the dough to rise. It was fantastic Stollen, but it was an all day and maybe a couple day event. We're going to show you a method that is shorter than that. It still takes some work, but is a fantastic Stollen recipe. In fact, if you had Stollen when we had noonday bread rolling, this was the exact recipe and method we used, except we're doing it at home. So here we go. We'll show you the steps and some of the tricks that make it work. All right, so the first thing we're going to do today is we're going to make a sponge, which is just a way to kickstart the yeast to get growing. Of course, yeast loves to grow in moist, warm environments. So Rebecca is right now warming up some milk. Just any old milk will do. This is probably 2%. And we're going to aim for about 105 to 110 degrees. So Rebecca has a thermometer right there in her pocket, which she'll use when it's getting close. Now, if you don't have a thermometer at home, that's okay. Don't sweat. If you stick your finger into any liquid that's getting warm, right when it's about to start to bite you in terms of temperature, so it's starting to get uncomfortable, you're probably about 105 to 110 degrees. If it's super comfortable, like if it's cool, then you're not there. And if it's so hot that it's frothing or that it really hurts when you put your finger in, you're too warm. So we'd rather be, if anything, a little bit cool than a little bit warm, because yeast dies when it gets above about 115 degrees, and we don't want the yeast to die. That'd be bad. In bread land, yeast dying is bad until we bake the bread. Then it's fine. So if you have to guess, and you're going to guess low, but if you stick your finger in and it feels nice and warm but not hot, you're in the right zone. Okay, we're ready to mix up the sponge. We just have a nice big bowl. We actually put the flour in here. We weigh everything because it's just easier to do that, but if I gave you a recipe, it probably has cups and teaspoons and all that. And if you have cups and teaspoons and you like measuring that way, then God bless you. We like to measure with weights because it's just easier, faster, and more precise. But it's no big deal. We do whatever you want. So we have just flour in here as it calls for in the recipe for the sponge. Rebecca is going to put the milk, the warm milk, into the flour, and she'll also add yeast. Now, a lot of people are scared of yeast. You don't have to be scared of yeast. It's not going to hurt you. You can just put the yeast right in there. As long as the water, in this case the milk, the fluid, is the proper temperature, the yeast is going to be just fine. And it's going to be very happy in that environment. And we need sugar, and the sugar is over here, as Rebecca just told me. So we're going to dump that in as well. This is a very sugary, moist environment for this sponge. You want to do it that way? Or you want to use it?
I use the whisk.
Yeah, let's see what it does with the whisk. It should look pretty liquidy. I'm going to show you. It's going to look pretty liquidy. And you're going to be amazed when we come back in a little while and show you this very same, what looks like a kind of a liquid gloppy mess right now, what's going to happen to it. And that's because the yeast is going to start doing its work. And yeast doubles its effectiveness, or its potency, or how fast it reproduces, for every 7 degrees Fahrenheit that it increases in temperature. So we are up to almost its maximum temperature. It's going to be very happy and very productive for the next hour or so. We usually let the sponge sit for about an hour, and you'll see a dramatic difference. So I'm just going to show this to you. See, it's kind of almost like a batter, almost the consistency of actually a pretty wet pancake batter. And when you see this in an hour, if you're like me, you'll be amazed at the difference. Okay, so you might be wondering, what do you do with your time while you're waiting for that sponge to do its thing? It takes an hour. And the answer is, the pros do something that is called mise en place, which is just French, which makes it sound both professional and sexy. It just means get everything in place. so that you can move right along when it's time to actually mix the bread and shape the bread and all that. So we're going to do some of that work right now. If you look at the recipe for Stollen, you're going to see things like eggs in there. You'll see lemon zest. You'll see dried fruit and some sort of liqueur, and then you'll see, you know, flour, salt, all the usual dry ingredients. So one thing we do, and we'll do while the sponge is working, is actually just put our eggs into some warm water. Now we have warm water here. We don't want to actually cook the eggs, obviously. So, you know, similar temperature to what you had for the yeast, 105 degrees or whatever. Just again, where it's warm to touch, but not scalding by any means. And you just put them there. And I do that because, as we talked about just a minute ago, temperature really matters with yeast. You're not going to kill yeast by making it too cool, but you will slow it down. And sometimes you want to slow things down, especially with like sourdough breads, where you want to do long, slow fermentation. I actually do bread at home. I couldn't do this with noonday bread, but I do bread at home that ferments overnight, sometimes for 24 hours in the refrigerator, so it's very cool. You don't kill yeast by making it cool. You kill it by going too hot, but you can slow it down. In the case of Stollen, you're not getting really any flavor from fermenting the flour and releasing the flavor from the flour. You get almost all the flavor from sugar, butter, lemon zest, eggs. I mean, that's where you get all your flavor. Cognac, yes, or in this case, kirsch. So, so we showed you this. We just put those eggs in there. They'll warm up a little bit, and then when we crack them, they're going to be more room temperature is what we're looking for. Rebecca already zested some lemons for us. You all know how to do that, so we didn't have to show you that. We've pulled our butter out and just are sitting out on the counter. We use unsalted butter because I don't really want to have any extra salt. I'll manage the salt in the recipe the normal way. So we use unsalted butter, and we just want to get that to, again, to room temperature so that it's able to be worked easily into the dough. Then you'll see Rebecca's going to weigh our flour and our salt. We use a big mixing bowl, and then we use a smaller mixing bowl often to measure things like salt and dump it into the flour. I never want to put salt in flour directly in case I make a mistake. I want to weigh the salt or measure the salt into something else and make sure I have the right amount and then put it in, because once it's in the flour, you can't get it out. So we just, you know, carefully do that to make sure we're not out of whack. Now, while Rebecca's doing that, I'll show you. You'll see in most Stollens there's dried fruit. I like Stollen with dried cherries. We're going to use golden raisins in this recipe, and also currants. And you'll see here they're all in here in this big bowl. And you can't smell this because you're watching a video, sadly for you. But we've also overnight, actually last night, I poured some lemon kirsch in there. I'll go get that since I didn't bring it on camera. So kirsch is just a cherry brandy from Switzerland usually. This is not a super high quality. If I wouldn't drink this, usually I would only put any kind of wine or liqueur into a recipe that I would drink. This is okay quality, not awesome, but for what we're doing, it's going to do absolutely fine. And I actually put all of the kirsch into the fruit last night so it would soak in, and that, of course, kind of fills that fruit with the flavor. And it also, or so I hear, it actually helps with keeping quality for the bread, because that alcohol extends the keeping quality. I'm not sure about that, because honestly, the Stollen doesn't sit around our table very long. I have 2 college-age boys, so it's gone before I know it. But that's what I hear. So we're going to get everything in place: the dry ingredients, the eggs, the zest, the butter. The fruit's been doing its thing overnight. You can even do that a couple days in advance. And if you just started to make your Stollen today and you didn't put the kirsch into the fruit, don't worry, you're not ruining the Stollen. It's still going to taste awesome. But next year, maybe try doing it a couple days earlier and see if you notice a difference. Okay, I think that's it for this little shot here. We'll come back in a little bit and do some mixing. All right, you might remember that we did a sponge where we kind of mixed all the liquids together and everything, and I said how dramatic the change is. We've done 2 batches today. Here's the second batch, and we thought it was pretty striking. So this one is, it's almost solid, you can see. I mean, it's slopping around in the bowl a little bit, but it's amazing, that one, how spongy it got. So that's how a really good sponge looks. All right, well, we have everything in place. Mise en place, right? We got everything? I think we do.
Fruit.
Yep.
Sponge.
Yep.
Eggs.
Yep.
Kirsch's in the fruit.
Yep.
Lemon zest.
Yep.
Nutmeg and flour together.
Great.
Salt, butter.
Salt. All right, so remember we kept our salt separate just to remind ourselves. Salt's one of those things very, very important, but we want to make sure that we don't forget it, nor do we want to make sure that we get the wrong amount in, so we did that. Oh, I told you before we were going to look at the difference between the sponge. Remember, it was kind of like a kind of loose batter, and in an hour, it's been an hour since we did that, you can see it's starting to get some structure to it. Maybe you can see that. It's still a little soupy, and I could let it go longer if I wanted to, but I don't want to. So we're going to go ahead and put it in. So, by the way, if I only had 2 tools in the world for baking bread, these would be the 2 I would have. So a bowl scraper. My favorite kind is a half moon shape like this. You can get these in lots of different places. This one happens to come from King Arthur Flour, but you can get it many places. And I like it because it's big. It also, the shape of that nicely fits with the bowl, so you can scrape it easily. So, and it's flexible. And then my favorite tool in the world for bread, a bench scraper. You'll see why in a minute. But we use this when we want to work on the deck, as we call the counter. So we're gonna put the sponge, first I'm gonna just mix up the dry ingredients. So all that is in here is flour and nutmeg and salt, and just mix it roughly. It's good to have it, get some of those ingredients mixed up so you don't have clumps, but that is unlikely anyway, given what's gonna happen next. Then I'm gonna put the sponge in here. Just gonna dump that sponge in as is, and I'm going to use the bowl scraper. You can see I'm using the bowl scraper just to get all that spongy goodness out of the sponge mixing bowl and into the big mixing bowl. And then we have lemon zest. So this was about 2.5 to 3 lemons in this case. We measured it in weight, but that's probably 2.5 to 3 lemons. By the way, I'm making, if you look at what we're making here and you say, wow, that's bigger than what we have in our ingredients, it's because we're gonna make 8 loaves in this batch. I don't necessarily recommend you do that. You might wanna make 2. So if you look at the quantities, that's why there's so much. Okay, so we have the sponge, we have the zest. We can add the eggs in. And that was 5 eggs because I'm doing a bigger recipe than if you do 1 time the recipe I gave you. And I'm actually gonna mix some of this stuff up first, and then I'm gonna add in. We have 2 ingredients remaining. If I did my checklist well, I'm gonna mix this up first, and then I'm gonna add in the butter and the fruit. I just want to get some of this liquid and some of the dry ingredients starting to mix before I add those 2 ingredients, mostly because I don't really want the butter it's at room temperature, it's nice and soft, and it will get mixed in, but I don't want to like melt it or pulverize it too much, because part of what the butter does is provides those pockets of buttery goodness, and you don't want it to be completely broken up. You'll see when we mix it all up. And then we'll add in the fruit. So
ready?
I think yes, we're ready for, let's do the butter first, I think. We'll do the fruit last. This is not health food. In our house, we only eat Stollen pretty much, right around Christmas, because if we ate it any other time of the year, at least the boss and I, we would be 900 pounds. And that's not the goal. So we would not fit in our house, in our tiny little house. That's true. Okay, so you can see it's kind of a rough mass here, and now I think we could throw in that fruit, which is going to also give us the fluid of the kirsch, which will help us a little bit too, because that dough is looking a tiny bit, it's looking a little bit dry. It will not be dry when we're done. It's because of the high butter content. It's a very rich dough. It feels kind of, oops, sorry about that. It feels kind of soft and almost like you almost think it's gonna be sticky, but because of the butter, it's actually not super sticky. And apparently, I'm just throwing dough right now, which happens. This is a lot more quantity than you'll probably be doing if you're doing this at home, because I would guess most of you, I think the recipe that I gave you made maybe 2 Stollen, and this is more than that. But I was too lazy to do a video with a small quantity and then have to make another several batches to make all of our friends and family happy, because there is a list of people, most of whom predate Noonday Bread and are just long-time recipients of our Stollen. And so they get Stollen every year. Okay, so you can see how this dough is starting to come together. My goal, when we did this for Noonday Bread, of course, we had a very large mixer, which made this significantly easier at this stage. It also was complicated at other stages, but at this stage, the mixer did all the work for us. You could do this in a stand-up mixer like a KitchenAid or whatever. That would be, I've done that in the past. I just can't fit this much dough in one of those mixers, which is why I'm doing it by hand. And also, I figured I'd show you how it looks when you mix it by hand, because that way, if you have to mix it by hand yourself, you won't be wondering, well, what happens if I mix it by hand? Because you're seeing us do it. Do you want to do this for a while? Or are you happy?
I'm doing just fine.
All right, great. Keep doing what you're doing, because it's really great. If you use a stand-up mixer, you could either use the paddle or you could use the dough hook. I'd probably try the dough hook, but what I found when I tried to do a stand-up mixer on these things, sometimes I had to use the paddle because the dough hook just didn't seem to grab the ingredients like I wanted it to. Okay, so you can probably see now it's starting to get the ingredients incorporated together. I'm not worried about it being perfectly evenly mixed yet, because when we put it out onto the deck, we're going to have an opportunity to make sure that all the ingredients are properly mixed. I just want to get the obvious stuff incorporated. And you can see I just rotate the bowl with my non-dominant hand, which happens to be my left hand, and then I use the bowl scraper to incorporate and kind of fold the dough back on top of each other and back on top of itself. There you go. Okay, so now, you know what, it'd be great if we had a little bit of flour. Maybe use this bowl back and just get us a little bit of flour for the deck. Now I'm going to turn it out in the deck, and you'll see if you're using the recipe that I shared with some of you. And if you want the recipe and I didn't share it with you, just shoot me an email or whatever, and I'll share it with you. I share recipes. That recipe actually I got from a really great book by Peter Reinhardt called The Bread Baker's Apprentice. So we're basically using his recipe. And I share recipes because recipes are actually not what make baking bread hard. What makes baking bread hard and what intimidates most people is not the ingredients and the list of ingredients, it's actually the process. And that's where the expertise is. So, plus, everything's a gift. So why wouldn't I share? Here, can you take this, Rebecca?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so this is kind of a big, very inconsistent mass right now. I'm going to start by just kind of folding it onto itself. This is a version of kneading. I am not putting any extra flour onto the deck yet because the dough actually feels, if anything, on a little bit on the dry side. I don't think it will feel on the dry side once we get the butter really incorporated, but this is not a normal dough. There is almost nothing normal about Stollen compared to other breads. And usually if the dough felt that dry when I put it on the deck, I would be checking my ingredients to make sure I hadn't forgotten a fluid or gotten the dry ingredients incorrect. But in this case, I'm not worried about that at all because I know what butter will do, the magic of butter. Okay, now you're seeing why I love a bench scraper. You see, I'm just going to use it. I use it in my dominant hand as a way to just, as the dough starts to stick it all, as a way to get it off the table. And I will even sometimes, literally, because I'll show you, I will sometimes knead with it. So I'm just grabbing the dough with the bench scraper, and you can see how it pulls it up off the bench that way. And now we're starting to get a dough that is what I expect with a Stollen. So you can see it's actually compared to, I actually made another batch of bread this morning, a sourdough, and that dough really sticks to your hands. You can see actually for as moist as this dough is, it's barely sticking to my hands. And that's mostly because there's so much butter in there that my hands are basically greased. That's the honest truth. Okay, so I'm gonna knead it for just a little bit more, and I'll show you a kneading method that I actually like a lot, right, that I've been using more recently. It's where I put it into like a long, flat, longish, flat rectangle, and then I roll it up. So I roll from my right to my left, turn it a quarter turn, and I once again have a nice kind of tubular rectangle, and I press it out into another rectangle a little bit longer, and again I use my bench scraper and I roll it up and then turn it a quarter turn. And you just do that a few times. I've found that really is a nice way to strengthen the dough, because that's what kneading does. It both incorporates dough and it starts to strengthen the dough. It strengthens the gluten strands, which is kind of the structure of any dough, any bread dough, at least anything with gluten in it. And if you want to ask about gluten-free bread, I am not your guy because I have not really tried that enough to have any expertise worth sharing. Okay, so you can see from, as you watch, they've got smooth consistency. It's all the ingredients are incorporated fairly well. There are little streaks of butter here and there, but nothing, no big chunks because the butter was at room temperature. The fruit is well incorporated across all the dough. So we're gonna let this sit now for about just 10 minutes just to rest. It tends to shape better. We're gonna shape it next. And it tends to shape easier if you just give it about 10 minutes to rest and to let the gluten strands relax a little bit. So we'll see in about 10 minutes. Okay, we're back. We took a 10-minute break or so. It wasn't precise, and don't worry about being precise. And you might notice that Rebecca covered the dough with just a nice cloth towel. Why did you do that?
Because as it's sitting, we don't want the edges of it especially to just dry out. It makes these awkward bits in the dough.
Right, so we do it just to keep the dough from drying out on the top and create a skin. And so now we'll unveil the dough. It looks a lot like I did before. And just probably a little bit more relaxed than it was. And now we're gonna divide the dough. I told you that we were making 8 loaves here. Of course, at home, you're probably just gonna make, 2 or something, and you could just, eyeball it and decide what 2 looks like. We have 8 here, and we're so used to this because when we had noonday bread rolling, we would weigh everything because we would make more than 100 loaves and we couldn't eyeball that and make sure everybody got their bread at the end of the day. So we weigh everything. So Rebecca's weighing here and aiming for the recipe I used is going for 1 pound 4 ounce loaves. So she's just weighing clumps of 1 pound, 4 ounces of dough. And you'll see that she's whacking up a piece, and then if she needs more, she's just adding a little bit more, and you can see it's right here on top. And I'm gonna just, this dough, we would do different stuff if we were making a different kind of bread, but this dough being so rich, I'm just gonna essentially incorporate those little extra pieces that Rebecca has in her dough and make one nice just ball, something like this, and set it on the table. And I tend to put those balls in order because, again, I want to work from the one, when I'm making my loaves, I want to work from the one that's rested the longest. In this case, it won't have rested long. I'm actually not kneading this in any way. I'm not working it very hard. I'm being pretty gentle because I want to be able to work it soon. And if you work dough that's rested too much, you have to let it rest again. And I want to get going and get this show on the road. So that's what we're going to do. So you can see I've got 1, 2, 3. I'm going to put a fourth one here, and then I'm going to build a second row, which you can't see on camera, above that. So I have space. There you go. This one. Okay. Great. And just making a nice another row of dough balls. Are we short?
Might be.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, this one's going to be a mini.
That happens sometimes. We make extra on purpose so that we don't short our friends and neighbors. That would be sad for someone.
Yeah, this is a mini.
It's all right.
It's a 1 pounder.
Okay. So now I have 8 balls of dough, and we're going to go ahead and shape those. And shaping Stollen is actually pretty easy. We'll show you, he says, confidently, wondering where he put. Oh, yeah, I left the rolling pin on the other side of the kitchen. I'm going to put just a little bit of flour on the deck, not much, because I don't really want to get lots of extra flour into the dough. This dough is wonderful as it is. And I'm just going to, actually Rebecca's better, generally speaking, at rolling things and shaping things than I am. That's why her nickname in the business was the artist. That's what it says on her, because she's got good hands. And I have strengths in the bread business, and awesome hands is not one of them. So we all must know our strengths. And we're looking to just get these into kind of an oval. It's not really all that precise. I got that in the way.
But you want an oval because you're going to end up
Right.
folding it and wanting like a half moon,
Absolutely.
long half moon shape.
So you can see that's about the right shape and thickness. It doesn't have to be uniform, doesn't have to be perfect. You can see it's maybe 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch thick. And I've got that oval now, and what I'm going to do, I have some melted butter here, and I'm going to take that melted butter and just brush it on to the oval of dough, the oval of doughy goodness. And so now I brushed butter on that, and then I'm going to I have just plain old cinnamon and sugar. We have a very complicated recipe for this. You put sugar in a bowl, and then you put in some sugar, some cinnamon, and then you mix it up until you say, that looks good, which is what Rebecca did. And then you call it done. So I'm just going to sprinkle that. And you can go as thick as you want to. There's probably such a thing as too thick, but there's definitely such a thing as too thin. So this is going to just be, when we fold this over, it'll be a little vein of cinnamon and sugar, like this dough didn't have enough of sugar to start with. And then I'm going to simply fold that half moon over, and we're going to actually go the other way, right? Go this way. And we're going to fold it into kind of a half moon kind of a shape.
What do you need?
Oh, just a sheet pan. And we do that, so we're mimicking the Christ child here. That's what we're doing with the shape. We're trying to make it like, you know, a swaddled baby. That's what we're looking for here. And then we're just gonna put that guy on the sheet pan, and we're gonna go 2 loaves per sheet pan. So Becky's got hers about ready to fill up. She put more cinnamon sugar in hers, which so you want Rebecca to be your Stollen shaper. Apparently, that's what I learned from this.
I just had a piece of Stollen from 2019. It had this nice, rich vein of buttery cinnamon sugar. So that's what I was thinking of.
2019 was a good vintage.
It was.
Okay, you folded the opposite way. I can't remember what we did. So
You said to fold that way.
yeah, no, you went the other way.
Anyway.
Anyway, it'll work. Yeah.
Oh, I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
So you folded the same way, but then you curved.
Right, I
the
curved
opposite
it
way.
the other way.
Okay.
Because I figured the
can
baby
curve
doesn't
that
want to
way.
fall out. He's not sprawled backwards with
That's
hyperextended.
true. That's true. That would be sad.
It would be sad.
You want me to face it this way?
Sure, they can look at each other. Okay,
I think
so
I missed. You got it?
that's right, I got you.
Okay.
Okay, and then what we're gonna do,
My baby's laying.
you fix that. I'll be right back. And I'm going to, you can probably still hear me in the background, thus showing that this is not a professional video because I wasn't thinking about this before we shot this, Jake.
It's a real life video.
That's right. So we're gonna just spray a little bit of spray oil on top of these guys. Not enough that it's gonna show up in the finished product. And we're gonna cover them with some, just lightly, loosely, cover them with some plastic wrap so that as they rise, again, they don't dry out, just like we said with covering the dough with a cloth. And we're just gonna leave that at room temperature. I mean, assuming your room is like our house, so it's probably 70-ish degrees. And then we'll let it rise. And we'll come back after we rise to bake. Okay, so we have an oven preheated, and these are the loaves. If you can just tell, if you touch them there, see how there's a little bit of an indentation stain. That's been 90 minutes of proofing. We call that, the last bit of rising is called proofing because you're proving the yeast. And now we're going to put it in the oven. And top's fine. Sure, we're going to do one each, so it's fine. Put them in there. My oven does happen to have, I have a new oven that has a convection setting. That's right, you can close it up. Nice, get another pan, which is nice. And if you have convection, all convection does is it tends to brown the loaves. It sort of blows some air in there, and it tends to brown the loaves quicker and more evenly. So we'll use that setting. I'm actually not convinced that the setting in this oven is all that beneficial from what the baking I've done in it so far. It's a brand new oven, but yeah, it's good to try it. So we'll have that in. It's going to be in there for about after about 20 minutes. We will check it and see if everything's okay, and then at that point we'll know, and we'll probably rotate it some. We'll show you that. We'll rotate it some, and we'll get another probably 15, 20. Okay, this is after about half an hour. We rotated. In other words, I shifted the loaves that were on the bottom rack and put them on the top rack about 20 minutes in. And now here we are about half an hour in, and Rebecca's gonna temp. In other words, she's going to just see what the internal temperature of the loaves are. You don't have to do this. You can actually use your eyes, look at the top of the loaves, look at the bottom of the loaves. We're aiming, it looks like it's almost, you can see
we're gonna get about 200.
you can't see it, but it's gonna be about 200. That's plenty cooked in the middle. So we're gonna declare these finished. We're gonna put them on cooling racks, and we're gonna put our next batch in. Okay, so here we are. We've baked off most of the Stollen. There's actually one batch still in the oven, but you can see they've come out. They're nice and golden brown on the top and the bottom. You can temp them if you want to, like Rebecca shows you. And then you'll see if you get the recipe that we've given you, there's a recipe for a nice, simple glaze where you can just take some confectionery sugar, a little bit of butter, and we use Frangelico.
It's pretty awesome.
Which is pretty awesome. You just drizzle that over the top of the Stollen before you serve it, and enjoy. We hope you have a great Christmas, and that your Christmas is filled with both joy and also with peace. Take care.